birthday.
Boy or girl?
You don't get to decide that.
What would you prefer?
Prefer a boy. I don't want to have to deal. I don't want to have to deal with boys trying to date my little girl.
Smart man.
See, I don't want those Jadens around the house.
Nah, you thinking me, you don't want them Rosses around the house.
Oh no.
Or them joints.
Oh, the D1.
Nah, you don't want them robbers around the house for real.
Oh, I hope
Hey,
your dog don't.
are we all done with all 4 questions?
Yeah.
We got great responses, great products.
Something like that.
Something like that? Alright. So let's look at these. So a researcher wants to design a sample survey to determine the amount of time that U.S. teenagers between the ages of 16 to 18 spend online each day. Ralston, what'd you say for this one?
For the identify the characteristics of interest.
Yeah.
Said the amount of time teenagers 16 or 18 spend online.
So amount of time 16 to 18-year-olds spend online. Anybody put anything different?
Nope.
That was exactly what we said every time?
Yeah.
Everybody said that? Yeah? One thing I do want to clarify with this, that's fine. However, the characteristic of interest is just the variable that you're interested in, all right? Or what you're going to really measure. Is there any part of this that's really not what you're trying to measure or collect the data on?
16 to 18.
The 16 to 18-year-olds, didn't that come up with a different question?
It did.
It did. Where did the 16 to 18-year-olds come in?
The second one? Which question?
The second what?
Number 2.
Number 2, the second question, right? The 16 to 18-year-olds is not part of the characteristic of interest, that's a part of the...
Sample survey.
Simple survey.
No.
The research.
No.
The
Say it again. The population, right? We're only looking at 16 to 18-year-olds. Yes, sir, can I help you? Okay. That's it. Trying to get his new haircut in there. So 16 to 18-year-olds is part of the population. The characteristic of interest is just that idea of the amount of time spent online. Does that make sense? So the amount of time spent online is the characteristic of interest. We good with that idea? Yes? Yes? Say again. Okay. So we got the characteristic of interest, the amount of time spent online. Brianna, what did y'all say for the population that the researcher is trying to measure?
Teenagers between 16 and 18.
Teenagers between 16 and 18, okay? Yeah, let's go with it. Kanye, what did y'all say? Same exact thing? 16 to 18-year-old teenagers? Trista? Yeah? Does anyone have any extra details that we might need to add? Kelsey? Do we need to clarify that it's U.S. teenagers?
We do, because everybody, the other countries,
It is U.S. teenagers.
It is U.S. teenagers, and say it again, Ralston, we're not...
They ain't fortunate like us. Now we have phones.
Legitimately, like if you're in Malaysia, if you grew up in Malaysia, do they have as much access to cell phones and Wi-Fi and internet like we do? No, so would they be very different than us?
Yes.
Yes, right? We're only looking at U.S. teenagers, right? Even if you were to say Alabama teenagers, could Alabama teenagers be different than California teenagers? Yes, okay? So we want to clarify that the population needs to only be what we're collecting data from, so this is U.S. teenagers ages 16 to 18. Do we see why that's important, why that shows up under population and not necessarily characteristic of interest? Right? Notice and this is an important distinction. U.S. teenagers, that's who I'm collecting data about, but the amount of time spent online, that's the data that I'm collecting. The data that I'm collecting is the characteristic of interest. The people who I'm collecting data about, that's my population. I don't see anyone writing that down, but that's a huge clarification, right? Population is who, or is I should say about whom. The data is collected. Whereas the characteristic of interest is the data that is actually collected. Okay. And one thing I want to clarify is, and I want to remind you is, when I ask y'all to do mathematical activities, I know that you're not going to have the perfect language for everything, right? Did y'all create an experiment earlier when it came to the anchored putting? Yes? Did any of you use the language like confounding or random assignment or replication? No? Did you already do those things though? So I need y'all to understand that y'all already know a lot of the math. It's learning how to put the correct vocabulary with it. And it's important to understand what the words actually mean. And that's why I clarify things like this. I give extra detail about population and about characteristic of interest. You need to know that to be able to apply it later. Okay? So take those extra notes to get that extra information in there. Alright? Emily. By the way, can I erase this about population and characteristic of interest? You're not writing anything down. Okay. Emily, Huck, or Patch? Who got it right? Huck did. Why?
Because we want to know the population of 16 million.
Okay, so why is, I guess a better question is, why is Huck right and Patch is not?
Because he's asking the population of all humans.
Okay, so who's going to be included here that we don't actually want?
Teenagers, not 16 to 18.
Everybody is not 16.
Okay, so who is everybody that's not 16 to 18?
Grown folks and little folks, and other folks.
Is this person including grown folks and little folks?
Yeah. No, he included
Only teenagers.
He included
So
19,
19-year-olds, we don't care about them.
17, 16, 15, 14,
Wait,
13.
we don't care about 17-year-olds?
I mean,
13.
19, 13,
15,
14,
14,
and 15. There we go.
No, 13. That's a teenager.
I said 13.
Oh, and 12 technically.
No, 12 is not
In
it.
the Bible, you skill
Teen.
teenager years.
Huh?
In the Bible, you skill teenager years. When you 12, you grown. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Read the Bible, yeah.
But
See?
technically in the Bible, they
Okay,
Hey,
let's
shut
clarify
up.
something. It doesn't actually say in the Bible that it's at 12. 12 is something that is Jewish heritage, and that's when a Jewish boy goes through his bar mitzvah and becomes a man.
Yeah.
But that's not in the Bible, that's Jewish tradition.
Hold up, so they
I
gonna
know
put the
this
men at
because
12.
I am ethnically Jewish.
Me too. I'm ethnically German, for real.
So technically, their manhood starts at 12.
I want to know about
In the Jewish culture. Now, also, I want to clarify something about that. The reason why it was at 12 is because in Israel, in ancient Israel, when you were 12, you were a man. Like, that was the time when you went out and you started a career at that point, or you started an apprenticeship to work towards a career, right? So, like, when Jesus is talking to Simon Peter and his brothers and stuff like that, they were fishermen. They were actually probably only 12 or 13 years old because they had just started within that career, right? So, like, those are some things to be aware of that, like, people don't consider. But again, that's Jewish tradition. Huh?
16.
That's a hustler mentality.
That's not a hustler mentality. They didn't go to school. They just went to work.
I know
They
you
get
heard
money.
Jesus
They
preach.
also died when they were like 50.
Yeah.
They didn't
They
live
lived a
that
good
long.
life.
They did live a good life. All right, we got to get back to the statistics though. It's important to recognize that we need to be very specific and clear, right? Earlier, y'all missed the detail of teenagers in the U.S. Here, Patch is missing that I don't want 13, 14, 15, or 19-year-olds. I just want 16 to 18-year-olds. We all good on that? Okay, so now let's talk about a couple of questions, survey questions that we could ask. Survey questions, what can we ask here? Jay, what was the one you came up with earlier?
What is the general amount of time that you spend online on a daily basis?
Okay, so what is the general amount of time you spend online?
Yes, sir.
And I'll just leave it as the general amount of time because that's kind of understood to be on a daily basis. Okay. Did anybody come up with any other survey questions that we could ask? I mean, first off, will that help us get to the answer of about how much time do 16 to 18-year-olds spend online? Yeah. Are there any other questions that anyone developed?
How much time do you spend online daily?
Say that one more time.
How much time do you spend online daily?
Okay, I mean, that's kind of the same idea. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Ralston, I think I saw that you had something a little bit different. What'd you put?
You got what?
How many times you log into an online account in a day?
So how many times have you logged in on an online account? So do y'all think that would answer this question?
I don't think so.
Yes.
It
Well,
might though,
like
but
each day.
we ain't gonna have time though. We just have like how many times they log in.
That's right, we'd only have how many times they logged in. I could log in one time but then spend 8 hours, right? Or I could log in 50 times but only spend a minute each time, right? Those are very different things. Does that make sense?
How much
And-
time do you spend on the logged in account? I don't know.
Okay. So I'm gonna come back to this in a second. I want to ask you this question. I heard a couple of people actually say this before. How much time have you spent on social media today?
See, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
You
Like,
can be online
They
on
go on Google
anything.
though.
Can you go onto Google and that still be online?
Yeah.
Yes, so is social media the only time that you're online?
No, would you count online as like having you Wi-Fi and stuff?
Yes.
So like just have
Like I probably wouldn't consider streaming online, but I would consider social media online.
Like YouTube? Or
YouTube I would consider online actually. I mean like a Netflix or a Hulu or something like that is usually treated separately because we usually get it on our TV or whatever. However, you can also get on those things on a computer. So maybe if I were to do it through a computer, I would consider it online. So there's a lot of gray area. And this is also why we need to be clear in the way that we design our studies, right? And so like this is an important distinction and something I want you to be aware of. When you create these questions, if you just ask how long, what's the general amount of time you spend online, could that induce some elements of bias?
Yeah.
Yes, because some people may not consider streaming to be online, but some other people may. Some people may not consider social media if it's on their phone online, but only if they do it through a computer. So do we need to be more specific with our questions? Yes, right? So that's something to be aware of, is we want to be as clear with our questions as possible and as much to the point so that we collect the best data. Does that make sense? And we reduce the effects of what?
confounding.
bias.
Ooh, which one is this?
Bias.
Bias.
Why is it biased?
I would say.
Because
Yeah, like,
what if
it ain't no variable. It just is what it is.
Well, there are variables, but there's no independent
Independent
and
and
dependent
dependent.
variables. You're just collecting the data. It's an observational study. Okay? So, let me ask you this question. How much time have you spent online today? Which of these two questions do you think would reduce bias the most?
The second one,
Why the second one?
because it got a general idea, like you asking how much time today.
Today? Because let's be real, do you spend different amounts of time online each day?
Yeah.
Yes? So like when you're asking this question, it's going to be very approximate, right? Will you be more accurate if I just ask the question of how much have you spent, how much time, that should say time. How much have you? How much time have you spent online today? Are you going to be able to answer that question more accurately? Yes. Right? And so that's another thing we want to consider. if I ask the purple one, there's actually going to be more bias or response, measurement biases, I think is still what it'd be there. There's going to be more measurement bias here because people are going to be very approximate and inaccurate with their responses. But here, if you ask just, hey, how much time have you spent online today, they're going to be more accurate. Are both these questions valid? Yes, right? And so the beauty of statistics a lot of times is not that there's only one correct answer. There are some answers that are better than others, or better questions than others, because I still probably should clarify what I mean by online, right? Under that question, if I'm going to really knock this out of the park in a survey, I'm going to clarify exactly what I mean by online. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for me before we move on to the song part of today?
No.
Do we feel like we have a basic understanding of observational studies, experiments, and populations?
Yeah.
We're starting to develop that understanding? Okay. That means I did something right. All right, so here's the next thing. At this point, we're going to do the song choice. You should each have one copy of every paper that is on the desk. One thing to clarify. All right? So,
Somebody did Bohemian Rap. Oh, wait, no.
so on the back of the Bohemian Rhapsody is where you'll find This Is America by Childish Gambino. You should also have the 3.2 StatsMedic. Now this, I need everyone to look at this. Hey Jordan, it helps when you're away. Same thing for Bree. Kanye, can you help your friends out back there? Okay. So these right here, all right. Miss Mommy has to record videos for UA, and so this is a release form. If you do not get the release form signed, she obviously can't have you in the video. It makes our job easier if you can be in the video. No one, she's not going to sell it anywhere. It's not going to be seen by anyone but you and your professor, correct? Okay, so that's not going to happen except in those regards. I also am going through a process called National Board Certification, and that's just, I am trying, if I become a National Board Certified teacher, it essentially means that I'm consistently working to be the best teacher for my students. And it's a recognition of that. I submitted last year, but honestly, I don't think I should pass on the first try. We'll see if I do. But this is it's a hard test. Like, there's like 4 different parts to it. It took me days to do everything. Actually, it took me weeks and weeks, but this is a release form as well. If you could get this signed, I may not need to use anybody in this class for it, but it'd be great to just go ahead and get both these signed at the same time. Okay?
Can everybody need one, right?
Yes, do you not have both?
We got that, but we don't, not all of them.
Which one do you not have?
I need to see it.
Which do, oh, this one? Okay.
And then I'm gonna-
One time. One time. Alright, 10 One oh something.
You got this one?
Yep.
Alright, 103,
This one?
105, 101, 102,
Oh, here you go.
107,
Okay,
109,
so,
108.
really quickly. Hey, listen up. So, we did a general introduction of observational studies and experiments. Now we're going to focus on observational studies for a little bit. Jaden, can you read our first objective today?
Explain why bias is a serious issue for observational studies and can prevent one from completing the goal of this study.
Right? So you need to be able to explain why bias is a serious issue and why it can prevent one or a researcher from completing the goal of the study. Let's see, Brianna, can you read our second one? Our second objective.
Identify examples of bias in study design.
Okay, so we want to identify examples of bias. We kind of talked about that with the last little bit. And Trista, can you read our last objective,
Reduce
please?
the effects of bias through the sampling method.
All right, and we want to be able to reduce the effects of bias through sampling. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to quickly listen to and watch This Is America. Clarification, obviously. There are some things that Childish Gambino does in the video that I do not condone or encourage in any way, shape, or form. Okay? So, but it is a very powerful song, and I think that it's relevant to today. So we're gonna still watch it and analyze the song. That's not what I want. That's what I want. Hey, y'all probably want to at least take a few minutes to watch video. Let's make sure we do not lose this opportunity in the future.
Hey, people in here, they sipping on this.
Oh yeah.
Stop. They yakking.
If you haven't ever actually looked at Childish Gambino's lyrics or investigated them or looked to see what other people have written about them and their analysis of them, it's really powerful what he is actually saying and indicating, which some of it you may have picked up anyways. But did you notice what he always did before he started singing This Is America?
Shot somebody.
Shot somebody. Specifically, who did he shoot?
Black people.
Black people, right? Like, he has very powerful messages that he's trying to convey, and so, like, it's one of those things, like, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, this is a legitimate issue, and we do need to address these things and talk about it. I think Childish Gambino does a great job of bringing issues of America to light and discussing them. He is honestly brilliant, and I would look at more of his stuff. If you've ever seen his show Atlanta, it really impacted me and changed the way I thought about a lot of things. It's rough to watch at times, but I think many of you would enjoy it. Anyways, moving beyond that, what kind of statistical question can we ask about this song, This Is America? What are some questions we could ask?
What meaning did you get from the song?
Okay, so if I were to ask different people what meanings did you get from the song, or maybe what themes did you get, can we get different responses from people?
Yes.
Okay, so what meanings or themes do people get from the song? What else?
How many people like the song?
Okay. So like maybe what percentage or what proportion? Because remember, how many is always relative to how big the sample is, but so what proportion of people like the song?
It would be like, how much you like the song, 1 out of 10.
Okay. Now that question of like, of actually having people rank could actually be numerical or categorical data, the way you're doing that. So those are two good questions. Any others? So here's a fun fact. You can look at the words within a song and actually, based on the word length, let's go ahead and say that, the average word length, you can actually infer the intelligence of that person. Earlier we listened to Bohemian Rhapsody, and we actually looked at the average word length within that song. And then we can actually compare that in this class to the average word length of This Is America. And there's some interesting features I'll tell you about with that. You can also, if you ever go, which no one does this, or not no one, I assume you've never done this. If you actually go look though at different speeches or different books or writings by people, you can actually determine if the same person wrote speeches based on the average length of words. Okay? And so what we're actually going to look at in this case, those are all great questions, but it was already up here. What is the average word length of the song? Okay? And so we're going to look at that because the average word length of the song is a good statistical question. Does anyone know the answer? No? If I choose 5 different words, will they all have the same length?
No.
No? So that's a great statistical question with what type of data?
Statistical.
With what type of data?
Numerical.
Numerical data, right? We're going to measure it. So here's what I need you to do. You have the songs, the song in front of you with the words. Quickly circle a random sample of 5 words, and then write those 5 words below. Figure out how many letters are in each word. Once you figure out how many letters are in each word, figure out the average word length of your sample. We all good on that?
Divide.
Huh?
Add them up and divide.
So you add up all the letters and then you divide by how many words there are, correct? When you finish doing that, I need you to come up here. I'm going to have a big old sheet of paper with it's gonna look like a number line, and I need you to mark the word length of your song, or of the words.
We all need to have the same.
Say again?
We all need to have the
No,
same.
you each should have your own
Oh.
set of 5 words. And so we should get lots of sample data from this. And you're going to mark it on this sheet of paper at the front of the room. Okay? So go ahead and select 5 words. Figure out the average word length of those 5 words. If you have questions or confusion, talk with the people in your group. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I know I passed out in the What in the world happened? Did you just, you need the songs and the...
No, they need some.
We got,
Okay, so you just
what,
need
we
the
got
songs.
add it in the
What
I don't
time?
know, what do I do?
What time is it? 1:20.
Not time to worry about the time, it is time to pick some words.
Which ones are you on? I'm doing this one.
I got a fraction.
Hit Control Enter to get the decimal version of it.
Alright.
I go write my,
Hold on 1 second.
got 5 letters per word.
Just have to have 5 words. It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't.
I was on 5.
There was that.
No, I got them P's and one P.
How
You
much?
got them things.
How much? Never. 5 plus 15.
Okay? So make sure that when you put your dots on here, they're nice and big and easy to see. If you have a similar average to someone else, just stack your dot on top of the other one. But go ahead and put it up here. When you come up, I need you to tell me what your average was, and I'm going to put it in a list in spreadsheets on the TI Inspire. You also need to make a TI Inspire list in spreadsheets page to make sure we get all the data in there.
America.
What if I got a decimal down around it
It's
or
America.
Leave it as a decimal and try to approximate it on that page.
And then control.
do I put the number?
Say again.
Do I put the number?
Now, just tell me what your number was.
5.
Control.
Hold on one
Not
second.
all the letters.
You said 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly 5? Okay.
5.8.
5.8. You already got yours marked up there?
Add,
There you
add
go.
all the letters together.
6.2?
Alright, I need to do that.
5.8? 6.6?
Just like in front of them, add them together.
4.4?
Divide it by 5.
Count all the
Count
Divided by 5.
Yeah, so here's what I figured you did. So when you redid it, you see you actually accidentally divided by 5 the second time. So like just scroll up
I got
the
it.
picture, hit enter, and now it's 28 divided by 5, hit control enter.
2 for y'all get 2 for that. 15 to 2.
Okay?
15 to Z, my boy.
3.6?
How you supposed to do it?
I need to make an announcement.
Oh my God. Come on.
And do anybody in here want to buy a ribbon?
No.
Going once?
No.
No,
You
no,
just
I'm
said
trying
no.
to teach a class. Come on. Hey, I'm trying to teach. I'm trying to teach.
If I had some
Stop
dollars.
distracting my class. Jaden.
We got you 4.
Hey, Ralston, I need you to close the door, it's time to learn. Come on, let's keep averaging those words, the word lengths. Let's hurry it up. Robert, what'd you get? 5.8.
5.
Kelsey, what was your average?
He gonna be swimming with the
7, exactly.
Throw it.
Okay. 10.4.